Hello, this is Angela with Parkrose Permaculture. It is the end of September and it is time to winterize garden beds. Today I'm going to be working on a veggie bed where I am trying to build fertility and also am interplanting with perennials. And I want to show you my process for one of the ways that I amend and improve my beds over the winter. I use a diversity of techniques, but this is just one of the ways that I do it. So I'm gonna have some follow-up videos showing you some of my other methodologies, but this is what I'm doing in this particular bed. So let's come back here into the backyard. As I'm walking back here, I wanna say thank you to the people who left comments and encouraging notes on my post about healthcare and permaculture and people care. And I just wanted to let you all know that my partner is fully employed again, so we have healthcare again. So thank you for the folks that were really encouraging, and I hope that my video helped give folks a perspective on what it's like in the United States to try and do permaculture when you are tied to full-time employment in order to access healthcare. Okay, so we're moving on into the backyard. You can see some of my veggie beds are getting tired. It's still in the high 50s, mid 50s at night, so I'm not pulling up all of my tomatoes yet. I did pull up some of them. Many other things are done and I've pulled them up. Summer squash, I'm done. So the bed I'm gonna focus on today is this one here. This is the orchard. And this bed is right on this other side of the fence from where there are chickens. And there's comfrey planted along the fence row here because it makes great duck food. This is a bed that for years I kind of grew garlic or tomatoes, and I'm cycling in perennials now. I have a chased tree here, which is very small. Some of y'all who follow my Instagram might know I had a really traumatic beginning of 2020, even before pandemic and everything. And so I tend to buy a tree or a plant to kind of memorialize or honor a difficult period in my life. So I bought this chased tree and it's going to fill in this area. And underneath I'm going to be growing more and more perennial edibles as time goes on. But for now, there's still quite a bit of sun here and I'm still doing annual veggies. So we go along this path, and this straight bed runs a little bit downhill, gets nice, good drainage. And you can see here, this is my process. So the things that were growing in this bed were winter squash, which you can see this is off one vine. This is my much beloved Burgess Buttercup. I think it's the best pumpkin there is. You can check out my video on them. And then I also had summer squash and I had some tomatoes in here, and I've pulled all that stuff up and I've chopped it up. And I've also chopped up nasturtiums and comfrey leaves and horseradish leaves and rhubarb leaves, and I've thrown them all on the bed. So I don't use a compost bin. I'm going to make a video soon on the methods of composting that I do use, but this is one way that I compost straight in the veggie bed itself. So you can see here I just pile up the green matter here, and then I actually take the material from the path. You can check out one of my videos on building compost, which I'll put the link to right here. I actually take the material out of the path, which is by the end of the year between dogs and kids and me and wheelbarrows, very broken down, and I shovel it on top of the green material here, and then I add fresh mulch. You can see how really broken down this is. This is just wood chips and dug straight out of the path. So that's good brown matter. So I have all of this put down. What do I do next? So here's my next steps. I'm going to add rock flour. Now, I'm a big fan of using azomite and other trace minerals, rock minerals, and I know that there's a lot of misinformation about that on the internet. And so I think that it is important to educate yourself about how to add rock minerals and what the benefits are. There are a lot of videos talking about how it doesn't work. And I think that the problem is that just adding rock minerals to the soil is not going to be enough to help your plants. Your soil microbiome has to be rich with bacterial and fungal life that can take these rock dust minerals and convert it to a form that your plants can then uptake. So it requires a symbiosis between the plants and the soil microbiome in order for rock dust minerals to really, really be effective. So I would love to do a video later about colonizing your soil with a healthy microbiome, especially if you live in an area where you're trying to garden that used to be open pasture or used to be a lawn or something. The soil microbiome is probably going to need to be sown with a healthy microbiome. So I'm going to use this glacial rock flour. I have a whole bunch of other trace minerals I do add, but for purposes of this video, I'm just going to use this one, and I'll do a more comprehensive video later on rock dust minerals. I am going to also sow with a cover crop, and here I'm going to be using white clover. Both the rock flour and the white clover I got at Concentrates, which I think is a fantastic nursery in just south of Portland. They're not actually a nursery, they're more of like an agricultural supply. They do sell plants, but they mostly sell a lot of bulk agricultural supply things. And they have the best price around, I think, for cover crops. So I'm gonna sow some clover here because I'm always down to fix more nitrogen. And then here you can see I got a really large load of wood chips recently, and a significant portion of it is very leafy. And this is all maple leaves, and there's a little bit of coniferous material in here too. And the leaves don't work as well in the path. What happens is that they break down too quickly, but they work great as leaf mold on the beds, and they will compost in place. So be careful if you're working with really leafy mulch, because it tends to have a lot of fungal spores in it that can irritate your lungs. So you might want to consider some protection for your face and your lungs if you work with them. So I'm going to throw all of this down according to the directions on the rock flour. I'll put a link in the description. And then this bed will be ready to go for the fall, for the most part. There's going to be a couple more things I'm going to do after that, but that's going to get this bed prepped and ready for fall. So let me spread all of this before the rain starts up here soon and show you what it looks like, so that I have these layers built of green material, brown material, trace minerals. I have cover crops sown in there, and then I have my leaf mold on top. And then I'm going to, throughout the winter, do a few more things to this bed just to give it a little boost. And because we live in the Pacific Northwest and we have a mild winter, all of this will continue to compost in place. It rarely gets below 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Most of the time it's in the 40s, 50s. All of this will still slowly cold compost over the winter, and I'll be able to plant right into it in the spring. Here is my glacial rock flour. So the directions say use 5 pounds per 100 square feet. I tend to actually just put handfuls of it around the base of my plants in the spring if they're perennial, kind of work it into the soil really gently with my fingers. Here I'm going to sprinkle it around the bed. I also buy other rock minerals in 40 and 50 pound bags. This was really inexpensive, and I just thought I would try it along with my more bulk materials. I'm not ready to mix those up. I have to mix them up in a wheelbarrow and then spread them. So I'm just working with this small bucket for now. So I'm going to sprinkle this along the bed, and you can see it's a really, really, really fine material. It literally is like flour. And why do we want to spread it? So when we're talking about eating a nutrient dense diet, where do our plants get the nutrients that we are that they are taking into their bodies and then that we are ingesting in order to have really nutritious food? Well, it has to come from somewhere, and it has to come from the soil. And I live in a climate with a lot of rain. Let me put my glove on here while I'm talking. I live in a climate with a lot of rain that tends to leach material out of the soil. And also, this garden was a lawn for a long time, and it's really deprived of all of the kind of trace minerals that you would normally hope to find in a rich agricultural area. So sometimes you need to amend, and you'll find that you add these trace minerals back into your soil and your plants are much healthier. This is entirely different than adding inorganic salt fertilizers. So I'm definitely going to have a comprehensive video about this later, but rock minerals, trace minerals are not the same thing as adding commercial NPK fertilizer, which is basically a byproduct of making munitions, and those are inorganic salts, and they damage the soil. When you add rock dust minerals, you are improving the soil fertility. If you have a good if you have a good soil microbiome, they are going to uptake these rock dust minerals and they're going to make them bioavailable to your plants. So I just sprinkle it and then I'm going to work it into the soil a little bit. I'm probably going to use about 1/3 of a bucket on this row, even though I could probably use as much as 1/2 of a bucket. So I'll work that in and then I'm going to throw the clover seeds down. I have added my rock dust minerals, which are rich in calcium, magnesium, and iron. Again, depending on where you get your rock dust minerals from, there will be different trace minerals in the soil, so it's good to have a diversity. Speaking of diversity, I'm going to sow my cover crop now. I use a diversity of cover crops. I kind of just do it on a whim, depending on what I'm feeling like getting that year. I'm a big fan of clover because it is a nitrogen fixer, because it makes good chicken and duck food, because it's low growing, so it's unobtrusive. It's a perennial, and it spreads slowly. So let me come show you over here. I try and grow it in the path whenever I can. The problem is I have 4 children and 2 standard poodles, so they tend to destroy it, but there are places where I have successfully gotten it established in the path. And I would love to see more of that. And then I can come along and just pick handfuls of it and give it to the chickens. It makes great beef forage. So big fan of white clover. I do use other things from time to time. Sometimes I'll use vetch or rye or red clover, crimson clover, but right now I'm using white clover. So I'm gonna throw these seeds down. My caveat here being I overplant, because I know inevitably some point in the autumn, my chickens are gonna get loose and they're gonna end up scratching and eating clover seeds or germinating baby clover. So I always overplant, and clover is really inexpensive, so not a problem for me to do that. So let me throw that down here. Now I wanna show you some clover seeds. Hang on one second here. Hard to do one-handed. So here's my clover seeds. They're really lovely. And I basically just broadcast them. And I'm gonna take a rake and rake all of this in together. And don't be afraid that there's all this green matter here. It's gonna break down very, very rapidly. So I'm gonna get that clover worked in, and then I'm gonna add the leaf mold, and then I'm gonna come back and talk about what I do over the winter. Okay, so here we are. This is the finished bed. It looks a little bit wonky right now. Like, nothing looks perfect in the fall. Fall is a state of decomposition and a state of shutting down for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere. Don't be worried if you see some green material sticking through your brown mulch. That will break down very rapidly, and I think it's important not to dress with too heavy of a layer of mulch on top if you have seeded a cover crop, so then it doesn't smother it. So it's just that light layer of leaf mulch, about 1 inch thick. And some important tips for what to do now. 1, don't walk on it. Don't compress this material. I've already raked in all of the seeds and the rock dust minerals and the compost material. I'll also add that I throw my spent radish pods in here, so I'm sure I'm gonna get a ton of volunteer radishes. I think they make a great cover crop. Also good chicken forage. So I'm just gonna let this chill out over the winter. And as I said, there is a little bit of maintenance that I will do over the winter. And that's namely in the form of adding extra nitrogen. And the way that I do that is using liquid gold, which is 1 part urine to 9 parts water. Urine is sterile. It's a incredible free source of nitrogen that we just flush into our watershed, and that makes no sense to me. So that will get sprinkled on top, and that nitrogen will kind of throughout the winter help jumpstart the decomposition, because this is pretty brown matter heavy. And that way I'll ensure that this bed is really nice and broken down and ready to plant into in the spring. So I hope that gives you a little perspective on one of the ways that I work over my beds in the fall and I put them to bed for the winter. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and please consider subscribing to my Patreon. That helps me keep making these videos. And please let me know if there's any particular educational content you would like to see that I can cover for you. Thanks.